Okay.
You are now live.
Thank you. Hello, and welcome to the Asheville Greenway Committee. And first of all, I would like to call attendance to make sure that we have everybody here. We know that Sunny will not be coming to join us until 4:30. But first of all, Kenny?
I'm here.
Good, thank you. Kristen? Kristen? Can you hear me, Kristen? I don't think she can. Leanne?
I'm here.
Thank you. Richie? Thank you. We don't have Mike. Let's see, Mike is not here. I don't see Mike. Well, are we gonna have a quorum, Lucy? Do you think we're gonna be short?
You have 5 members of the total of 9, so you have a quorum.
Not of the, let's see, Jack is not a member, he's a
Right, and
ex
Tristan's
officio.
So you have a total of,
Oh, counting myself, there's 5. Okay. Kristen, can you hear us now? I don't think she can.
I'm gonna try to reach her by text.
Okay. Okay, does anybody have anything to add with the agenda? Okay, I'll say that's no. Also, Jack is an ex officio member, Jack Henderson from Riverlink. Say hi, Jack. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I'll
Did
just
everyone
note the wrong dates on the agenda. It says May 7th instead of.
Yes. Right. I corrected that on my own.
Wait, what?
It's May 5th, not May 7th.
It's May. Go to Mayo. Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Richie. So, has everyone had a chance to look at the meeting minutes? I need a motion to approve the minutes, if everyone has had a chance to look at them and approve them.
Yeah,
Oh, Kenny, you make a motion?
they're
All
great.
right.
I'm to approve the minute.
A second.
Do I have a second? Thank you, Leanne. So we will, I don't think we have any public comment today, do we, Lucy?
No, we don't.
Okay, good. All right, so Lucy's gonna start with our staff updates. Is that somebody trying to say
Okay.
something? Okay. Go ahead, Liz.
Hold on 1 second. Let's see who.
Oh, I see Mike has arrived. Mike is here.
Mike
Hi,
is joining. And Kristen, can you hear us now?
I can hear you.
Oh.
Yes. I'm so sorry. I looked at the clock and I was like, I had my speaker off. I apologize.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, I'm glad you're
Great.
with us.
Well, we approved the agenda in the minutes while you guys were away, and we're at the staff updates now. So, as usual, I included that spreadsheet of all the transportation department's projects. You can look at those at your discretion, but I'll just update you on the Greenway important ones. The French Broad River West Greenway, I've got nothing but good news with that. It's moving along without any issues. We're expecting to be done with the construction in late July, early August. The Swananoa River Greenway is also going along pretty well. We're finishing up our reviews with staff and other agencies and preparing the bid documents to put it out to find a contractor to build eventually. And as you might remember from last month, we're $2.5 million short to be able to do the entire project in one swoop. And we have applied for funds, or we are in the process of applying for funds with the TDA money. I believe that grant application is not due until this month, but it will be part of a larger city list of requests, all of which are East Asheville centered. So the Swannanoa Greenway fits into that nicely. We also applied for the same funds through an STBG grant at the MPO. We would not be able to receive those funds until 2027. So even though it's a great backup plan, it is not as great as if we were to get the TDA funds, because we would be able to work seamlessly through that instead of having to break it into two sections. And if we were to break it into two sections, what we would do, I believe this is our plan so far anyway, is to construct the part that starts at Glendale and Thompson and move eastward to where the new Greenway would hit up the Riverside River Park Greenway, the existing Greenway at Walmart. So, and then after that, the sections that would need to be built are just a short spur up to the parking lot at Walmart and create wide, it's a wide, like 16-foot sidewalk along the parking lot where there's a sidewalk now, but so we would need to take out some of the parking to be able to make a wider facility there, all the way to the bridge and then over Bleachery Road Bridge to terminate this project at the corner of Swannanoa River Road and Bleachery Road Bridge. So we're hoping that the TDA will be able to supply the funds for us. We won't know until October. So fingers crossed. And we'll be talking more about that later today with Claudia.
Do you have any idea at all what the chances are? Do you have any feelings at all?
No, just from historic funding and awarded grants, Greenways tend to have a good chance of getting money. There are going to be a lot of Greenway requests. I've heard from Woodfin in Buncombe County and Riverlink, I believe, and Asheville Unpaved, I think, is also seeking to apply for a grant for those projects. So that might be a little bit of an overload and somebody might get knocked off. I have no idea, is the bottom line. I'm just completely rambling now. So who knows is the formal answer. Nasty Branch Greenway is going good. The designs, we're just finishing up still the permitting, waiting for approvals. We'll be making the construction documents for that and putting it out to bid. My best guess at this point is that we will be putting it out to bid in the fall, finding someone who will be under contract and probably starting construction at the end of this year, December, or beginning of next year, 2023, like January. So that's my best guesstimate now. We're working with the interpretive signs of that Greenway, and that's still going fairly slowly, but it's got some motion. We have some drafts of the signs that we want to introduce to the Southside neighborhood and get their feedback on before we do a larger public engagement on the signs. And I'll be going to the next Southside Neighborhood Association meeting later this month to be able to introduce the drafts to them and start getting their feedback. I think it's going to be a few months of work once we are able to get into the neighborhood and start looking at these signs, but since it's the last thing that will need to be put up on the Greenway once it's built, we're actually talking about the metal plates that will go into the framework, the brick framework along the Greenway. So it's literally the last thing that gets put in. So we have over a year to refine these signs, and I'm pretty excited about it. And the North Rad Tip Greenway, as you know, we put that, and then we put the request for letter of interest for engineering of that project out a couple months ago. And through an addendum, we paused the process because we were waiting for the new STIP to come out, and it did last week or the week before. And now, with the help of Tristan, we're going to meet with the North Carolina DOT office that will be working on this project, and coordinating the exact project parameters of both of our projects, because they will be doing the road improvements to Riverside Drive, and the city's looking at a greenway. And so as long as their timeline and funding is conducive for us to work with them with our timeline, ideally what we want to do is change the project area of the North Rad Tip project to be just from where the Rad Tip ends at roughly Hill Street or White Duck Taco, and work on the off-road Greenway to Pearson Bridge Road, which is the point where the Greenway would need to cross the road and the railroad at that intersection of Pearson Bridge and Riverside, and then continue along the road on the east side of the businesses to get to the corner of Broadway and Riverside Drive. And the reason why we know we have to do that is because there's a transmission line easement and a railroad on the western side of the businesses, so the river side of the businesses from Pearson Bridge north. It just isn't feasible to build a greenway there. So we know we need to make it a multi-use path along the road at that section.
Lucy, where it goes through like the salvage station and such, that's going to be where the new bridges are going to be. Are they going to put the greenway in before the bridges are built, or are they going to push it back to be done at the same time as the bridges?
That's a great question, Mike. I know our construction dollars are available in 2025. So my guess is that we'll be building the greenway before. And how do we manage that during the interstate construction is something we definitely need to coordinate and consider. But there's a lot of things that need to be figured out and determined before we can confidently say we're constructing in 2025 anyway. So it's just one of those things that is a great point and needs to be talked about throughout our process, the Riverside Drive team's process, and the interstate team's process. So it's going to be very active down there.
Yeah, it will be. Really, may not really be safe either while they're doing the I-26 construction.
Lucy, quick question. For that corridor, that Hill Street to Broadway corridor, has parking and access been identified as a priority to that space, or is it anticipated that folks would access it, from pre-existing parking areas and things like that, or otherwise used for commuters?
That'll be part of the considerations of this design, Jack, and also with the bridges that will be constructed on I-26, there might be opportunities where they're going to need to buy entire parcels of property, much like we did in the Rad Tip, which will be perfect public parking lots.
That would be good.
Something definitely has to be worked out, because even under current conditions, there's parking strain on that mile section without any greenway. So
that all sounds great. Yeah, and I can anticipate something kind of like the 240 Bowen Bridge parking footprint there by Spring Park Silver Club. One thing I think about, with our Gateway Park area plans too, is thinking about access to that, and I'm like, getting not worried, but I'm cognizant of not putting too much pressure on the Pearson Bridge paddling access point there. I'm anticipating folks using that to access the Greenway, which is great, but I just want to make sure that folks are still able to get trailers in there and park and access the river and stuff like that.
Right.
Jeff, have you looked at the amount of land that NCDOT is taking as part of the I-26 corridor project? There's going to be quite a bit of land, and I don't know, well, I know that they haven't decided yet they're going to be able to turn it over to the city for parks, for parking lots, what's going to go underneath all those flyovers, because there's going to be 3 bridges crossing the river. So it's quite a bit of land that's going to be underneath that will be taken by NCDOT, but all the roads will be up in the air, so there'll be quite a bit of space underneath them.
Right. It'll be a good opportunity.
Yeah.
Sure will.
Again, it's not a guarantee that we'll be able to get parking lots
Right.
out of it. It's just an opportunity that we'll try to pursue during the development of that whole area. And it makes a lot of sense to get some parking down there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Next is Reed Creek feasibility study. The funding for the Reed Creek feasibility study has been pushed to the fiscal year 23, which happens to be July 1. And so it is not creating any hiccups for our timing. Our biggest hiccup right now is that we're just up to our eyeballs getting the gap plan through to council and all of the other projects that we're wrapping up that we haven't been able to put much steam behind. Our request for letter of interest, that's the first thing that needs to be drafted and then approved by the DOT before we put it out to look for a consultant. So we're a number of months out before we get started on that. It is a feasibility study only, and so whatever comes next, we'll have to line up the funding for engineering, if whatever level is necessary, and then construction too. So we've got the first seed money, but we'll have to work hard to keep the progress of that project going. And then East Patton Streetscape plan, I maybe mentioned last month about that. The city is pursuing a grant through the MPO STBG funds that will let us study how to tie in the I-26 project into the east part of Patton Avenue. So after you cross the bridge and you're entering into downtown and you're leaving the project area of the interstate, what can we do to create the best streetscape for multimodal transportation, and also looking at some implications of future land use and a better grid system, so not just Patton Avenue, but the possibility of looking at like Clingman Avenue from Patton to Hilliard is a very important connection for Greenways, and also West Haywood could become more part of this grid too, and so people walking and biking from down in the River Arts District could use Chicken Hill and West Haywood to get up into town as an option, as well as the Greenway that I-26 is putting in. So the I-26 project at this point will be a design build project. That means they'll hire one contractor that will do it all. So there's a lot of details in the plan as it stands right now that are unanswered. For example, like once you're off of Jeff Bowen Bridge, where do the bike lanes go? Do pedestrians need to cross anywhere to be able to walk safely, and et cetera, et cetera. So this plan, we hope, will be able to answer some questions in a very pro-central business district gateway and multimodal transportation manner. We're pretty excited about it. It's $220,000 project. And so Tristan's here. I can't remember what year the money will be available for us to get started on that plan. And so if you know it off the top of your head, that would be great, but I don't expect you to know. This is
July 1st, so T minus 55 days or something like that.
thank you.
July 1st of this year.
Yeah,
Wow, that's great. Thank you, Tristan.
yep. So those are all the updates that I have.
Quick question.
Lucy, one question, just for the minutes, because I missed this. Way up back at the top, what did you project a completion date for the French Broad River West Greenway?
Late July, early August of this year.
I'll say late summer.
That's probably good. I forgot to introduce Tristan. Tristan, do you want to say hi? He's our visitor today.
Hey folks, I'm Tristan Winkler. I'm with the French Broad River MPO. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Lucy, one question on the project list, the transportation project list. Merriman Avenue wasn't on that list. Do you know what's happening with that project? They're putting in sidewalks, not the North Merriman Avenue.
They're not putting sidewalks in, yeah. So this project, the 4 to 3 lane conversion of Merriman Avenue was created because the DOT is planning to resurface Merriman Avenue. And so the city and the DOT engaged in conversations of converting the 4 lanes of road to a 3 lane with room for bike lanes. And it has been misconstrued, I think, through media and lots of different viewpoints that this is exclusively a bike lane project. And I would disagree with that for a number of reasons. But the benefits are that all transportation professionals that are involved in this do believe it will cut down in crashes. We've had a number of very serious pedestrian crashes on Merriman Avenue, so this will make crossing the road much easier and will also provide a lot of more distance between where people are walking on the sidewalk and where cars are driving on the roadbed. It's not going to make the sidewalks better from an ADA accessibility issue. We're not even able to touch the sidewalks at this point, but it will provide better space for pedestrians and also will give some room dedicated to bikes, which is exciting. It's kind of the unknown from transportation engineers' point of view. Remains to be seen if this is going to be a useful and successful project, but everyone is encouraged at this point. And the city of Asheville has a resolution going to council. I believe it's their next meeting, where they will be approving the city working with the DOT on this project. And I think our financial obligation is somewhere in the ballpark of $275,000 to work on just the restriping of Merriman Avenue from Weaver Boulevard to Midland Avenue on
Midland Drive, I think it is.
like down past Ingalls and around the lake.
So Lucy, are they going to also put in crosswalks?
Oh, and Mike just said the Merriman agenda's been moved to June. Yeah, they are going to be doing some signal work and some crosswalk work.
Oh, good.
And at intersections,
But
they might have better intersections with ADA stuff at the intersections.
Okay.
I'm not an expert on this, obviously, so.
Thanks for that update, but I was specifically asking, they had talked before that they were going to redo the sidewalks along Merriman as a separate project.
Yeah, that's separate, totally separate.
Right, and I was wondering, is there anything, have you heard it, is that project just wandering and not happening?
That is not even, no. That is a future project with a capital F.
Too bad. We worked on that years ago from the Bike Ped Task Force to make improvements to those sidewalks. So it's unfortunate that that's not being done.
Yet. Just say yet.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, thank you, Lucy. Does anybody have any other questions of Lucy on staff updates? Okay, well, let's move to new business, Lucy.
I'm really glad Mike Z is here because he attended the meeting that I was able to attend for the first time this afternoon, where the staff members and council members that have been working on an idea of new board and commission restructuring were laying out how it might work and getting feedback from it. So I'm going to say it in a nutshell. I was able to listen and watch it today, but I was doing a couple of other things too, so I wasn't able to like capture the slides and show them to you or anything like that. I would highly encourage you to go to one of these if you are able to. But the issue is that we've heard from a couple of different directions that boards and commissions are not working out as efficiently and successfully as they possibly could. And one of those directions is council doesn't feel like they're hearing from boards and commissions regularly. The public feels like boards and commissions are hard to get to, and it's a time commitment, and many of the boards and commissions are having a hard time getting quorum of the people who do commit to volunteering in the commissions. And then there's a lot of staff time that goes towards our monthly boards and commissions and committee meetings. So they're trying to see a way to streamline it so that there's a direct communication from council to these commissions that staff from all different departments can go to and relay our information so that there's a possibility of more cross-pollination in interest groups, being able to understand all of the different points of view from different interests. And other than that, that was about as much as I was able to absorb. Mike asked a couple of great comments. So if you don't mind, Mike, if you want to talk a little bit about what you heard and thought.
I have a problem because I'm not sure exactly what they see the problem as. They keep saying they're trying to fix things and that they're not getting word from the boards, is what you told me. But they, at the same time, they seem to put the council seems to put a block to keep the boards from talking directly to them. And then the other thing I keep hearing is that it costs too much to have the boards and commissions. And I would argue that the boards and commissions actually save the city council money because we're the ones who are going out and doing the research on the signs, and so we're actually saving the city money as opposed to costing the money. I think all the city council hears is from the department heads is, I have to spend this much money on people to attend these boards, but they don't say how much money they have saved because of the boards doing all the footwork for the city council or the city employees. So I think there's a false narrative that the boards are just a cost. You know, it's just a cost, a sunk cost, and you get nothing out of it. I think that basic idea is wrong, and I would agree that we don't get enough access to the council members. But at the same time, is that not the council members' fault?
Yeah, because they're not attending the meetings.
Yeah.
But that may be because they're too busy. Leanne, you have your hand up. Did you want to make a comment?
Sure. I attended one of the initial information sessions, and I am sympathetic as I work in an organization that is based on a lot of civic engagement, and from what I can gather, there are a multitude of somewhat duplicative, perhaps, boards and commissions. some streamlining might be beneficial, I think, you know, the importance is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, and the only other last thing I'll say is that the irony is rich when they have people, when they would like to see greater engagement and then they schedule the meetings around restructuring during a time when it's most difficult for the majority of people to participate, which is during the workday.
Yes.
So, you know, I think it is really unfortunate if the genuine interest is civic engagement in the restructure process, that they aren't doing it in the evenings like they did when they started the initial sessions. They did maybe one evening one, which I did participate in, maybe two, but these subsequent sessions being held during the day to reframe what it should look like is seemingly intentionally exclusionary. So that's unfortunate.
I have a really dumb question. What's the difference between a board, a commission, and a working group? Lucy?
Dang, you're gonna catch me. I don't know. So boards and commissions are typically more of the higher level appointed positions that directly give input to council right now, like the multimodal commission. The planning and zoning board is an even higher commission because it's a semi-quasi legal deal that where they're really impacting people's private property decisions and development decisions and things like that. And then what we have our committees through those commissions, like ours is a subcommittee of the multimodal commission. It's the working force, task force, or whatever that you were talking about that
Yes.
is
that more
one
employee?
that's tripping me up because I don't quite know how that exactly fits. Some people prefer to be called a working group. We have the bike ped task force, for example, but they aren't an official committee of city government. They prefer to stay out of that.
So, like on this last meeting, it was specifically talking about supposedly talking about working groups, but as much as anything, it seems to be about boards and commissions. And is there a direction to change working groups or boards and commissions?
Good question.
Ask me that again because my teenage son was lurking around. I was afraid he was going to do something inappropriate in the background.
Well, that's the teenage center for.
I know.
The city council wants to look at restructuring boards and commissions, but this meeting was about working groups. Why are...
I know the answer to that one now.
Okay.
So this working group, what they're talking about are people who are willing to come to these sessions and then do future feedback and work on whatever this new restructuring will look like. So everybody that was there today is part of a working group. That's how I understood it.
But, you know, Barb talked about working group with the DOT and city staff. That's a different type of working group, and I don't know if that was included in that or not.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I just know that working group between the DOT staff and city transportation staff are not working on these restructuring
No, they're
at
not.
all. Yeah, so it's just a different
Working group.
different type of work group, right?
Okay. So they're not included in that. then.
And it's not a public meeting. It's us all getting together and working on discrete projects or overall policies or whatever.
Okay.
Okay. So stay tuned to that. I really am, I know more than you do, to be honest. I'm not informed. Trying to be.
One last question on that. So what's a committee?
Well, so for example, the Greenway Committee is a subcommittee of the larger commission.
Yeah.
So-
Like the I-26 committee, which I'm on,
Uh-huh.
reports directly to the city council.
Okay, I don't know.
I think it's different.
Again,
I think it's different.
Yeah.
I understand.
I mean, maybe, Mike, because that was formed before I even started working at the city, but maybe that's a particular discrete project. They needed a committee to work on that. I don't know why it's not called a work group instead of a committee, except that you're appointed by council, right, to
Yes.
sit on it. So that might be the difference.
Okay.
It's sort of like a commission in a sense.
Don't make me go read Robert's rules to be able to.
Appointed.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I think there's a lot of words that are mixed together.
Hmm.
for these
Lots
different
of,
positions.
oftentimes it goes like that there's lots of,
Yeah,
lingo.
if you would, unfortunately, neither of us have a picture of, or maybe you did, of the slide where it shows the 6 rectangles before and the 6 rectangles afterwards.
Yeah,
They
that's,
look like all they did was rename 2 of the rectangles. Right? I mean, I think they renamed 2 of the rectangles, and that was the gist of it.
mhm,
Did you get that feeling?
mhm.
Okay,
With all due respect to our existential future, could we move on to the next topic?
yes, I think we should. Welcome, Mike. Thanks for joining us. So the next meeting of business is the gap plan review of the action plans. Now, last meeting, we just reviewed the whole gap plan. This time, we wanted to look at the suggested action plans from the gap plan. There is a huge list. I spent some time looking over them, but I think the only ones that we really need to review are the ones related to the greenways. Is that right, Lucy? We don't need to be dealing with the others.
Well, yeah, we can look over some of the others we have a lot of goals. We have 10 goals in the gap plan. I just put chapter 10 in the link here.
Right.
And they include, there's a
Equity.
goal for equity, a goal for safety. So we might want to review those that are just overarching goals, but let's look at the Greenway goals in particular today and give me any feedback that you would like to make on that.
So you don't want to go over the equity ones?
Yeah, we will, but,
Okay.
so
One,
I'm interested in any feedback you want to give me on the whole gap plan,
Okay.
but maybe we could take it in bite-sized chunks since our meetings are short.
right, because I don't think we'll have time to go over it all, but we
Right.
have to go over Tristan's stuff too.
Right.
So let's plan on just going over maybe 5 or 6. The first 1.1 is develop transportation equity and metrics to evaluate projects. And that should take 0 to 3 years. And evaluate the transportation equity. So that basically, as I see it, is looking at how transportation in general is equitable, right? To me, that's, you look at each one of them.
Right. So what we were hoping to do is get a equity plan for the transportation department because there's a lot of nuances to what equity is in transportation that might be different than equity in affordable housing or equity in riverfront redevelopment, although they could be very similar, or public safety or any of the other tenets that the city is working on. And so we want to refine our definition of what transportation for equity in transportation looks like. So that's why that is one of the action number one in the equity goal.
Yeah, and I would say it's looking at, particularly if you want to be really equitable, making sure that people don't, how transportation can work for those who don't have an automobile.
Right.
I mean, to me, that seems to be where you start.
Yeah.
So a lot of
I know.
I guess what you would do is just look at making a list of the problems that exist.
I see that as an effort that our department needs to make, and then I will share it with you as we define it.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing. We don't have the time to go over looking at
Oh,
everything.
no.
But we can evaluate what they look at and give our input on it.
Yeah. I think I'm going to make this much shorter with a slide presentation if I can get it to start. And I know I'm sharing my screen and it's taking forever, but
Okay.
I've summarized the goals on a couple of slides.
Good.
Please wait. Okay. So yeah, for equity, our goal for equity and transportation is to develop an equity plan, prioritize pedestrian projects in high equity needs areas. So this is an overarching goal. It's not just Greenways. This has to do with ADA improvements and additional sidewalks. And then support the city and county efforts in neighborhood stabilization strategies. So if you remember our work in equity and the discussions that our staff had with Emma that I reported to you, that
Right.
there's sincere apprehension of having any kind of improvements made in their neighborhood because many of them rent spots in mobile home parks. So there's a fine balance to any investment going into their neighborhood, increasing the value of the land that they rent from. So they would prefer to see, this is an apprehension that they're feeling, they prefer to see no improvements than improvements for fear that they'll be displaced, that the property owners would prefer to
make more money.
Make more money and sell the property, and they would be displaced. So that's why that's it. So then moving through project development, I don't think that there's anything in here that it's just refining more the ways that our transportation department can work with capital projects and resurfacing schedules and things like that to make things move quicker and develop more. The policy ones are also very staff heavy, where we're making updates to the UDO and the specifications and design manual to include exactly how you should build our facilities. Here's one you might like, Mike, is to create lighting standards. We don't have that yet.
Yes.
And that does include greenways, but it also includes just city streets, neighborhood streets. Utility agreements, that's something that you don't have to worry about. Traffic control and requirements at development sites, that has to do with when someone's building things and they close sidewalks or safe passage around their construction site. We're known to not be able to enforce those, and it's really important. Update neighborhood sidewalk programs to use the gap prioritization list. That also does not really have much to do with us. So tools would be mostly their IT things that we need to work on. So updating the Asheville app, working with multiple departments on lots of different updates through their communications. Creating an app for accessible parking locations. That's also something that would be important for greenways and for natural surface trails when they come around. And expanding counters. So we recently purchased 5 counters. Thank you very much, Tristan Winkler and the MPO for giving us some money. And we'll be putting those down in the RAD. And then creating a dashboard for GAP like we have for capital projects. And then safety are kind of obvious ones, but I think you'll like the second one. The first one's just reducing the number of pedestrian crashes.
Yes.
No-brainer. But this one ties in with our etiquette campaign,
Right.
promoting civility among all roadway users. That would be through education and then improve reporting systems for crash data.
Hey, Lucy, can I ask a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
Reduced number of pedestrian crashes. Why do we, why
Reduce
just,
to 0.
yeah, no, why just pedestrians?
You know, that's a good question, but it's probably because it's a pedestrian plan. But I can.
I mean, doesn't the gap, well, here's a couple things. I thought GAP was like all active transportation.
No, it's not bicycle.
Yeah, hold on, Mike, hold that thought,
Okay.
and we'll get to that in just
Right.
a second. Let me just get through the overarching goals, and then I'll show you the Greenway goals.
Okay, well, I would have feedback for vulnerable road users, particularly if you're talking about e-devices. That really opens up and diversifies what a pedestrian is if we're gonna wrestle with e-devices and conveyance.
Okay,
I'll shut up.
well, you don't have to shut up for long, because the first thing on the GAP vision plan is to update the bike plan so that it works with our pedestrian and greenway and ADA plans.
Yeah.
Incorporate complete street guidelines into our design manual. An e-device policy, just like you were talking about, Mike. Work with partners to update wayfinding. That's, you know, working with the tourism development group and other groups. Encouraging programs and events of every kind from every group and walk of life. And then to get to our Greenway specific goals, and we can go back to the report if you want to, but we have funding, supporting the natural surface trail development, improving wayfinding specifically on the greenways and through downtown to get to the next greenway kind of action. Conduct the intercept survey, which is a particular kind of survey. Annually. The etiquette campaign for ongoing education, enhance accessibility of trails and greenways through online and trailhead information. So that would be, like we were talking about before, categorizing the natural surface trails so that people know before they get on them what they should expect as far as, you know, grades. Yeah, they can judge for themselves. And then improve communications just always and in every direction. We're always needing more communication and routine maintenance and assessment. Those are the points that were listed in the Greenway section. So that starts on page 205, and I believe there's 2 pages of Greenway updates that are specifically just for greenways.
Right.
So Mike, I'm capturing your comment now. I don't know if anyone else has any.
I just hope that as the staff comes up with things, that we'll have a chance to look at it and make comments on it and add or just say we like or don't like certain parts that they're doing.
Well, hopefully, once this plan's adopted, that will just be a regular thing on our agenda where we just say gap plan implementation update, and
Yeah,
I can fill you in on all the different things we're trying to get done.
that'll be good.
I'm
Okay.
gonna stop sharing so I can see everybody, and just for the sake of time, this is a lot. So if you want to email me your comments, if you have any additional ones, or if you'd like to continue it as an agenda item next month. We were originally planning to go to council in May 24th, but we've pushed it back. Right now, it's maybe June 20th. But there are some very important parts of the ADA master plan that need to be determined before it can be approved. It's looking like that might take longer than we had anticipated, though there's a chance that the gap plan will go in July, or they only have one meeting in July and only one in August, so I was really hoping. But so we might still go in June, but we might be pushed back.
Okay.
I don't know yet.
Ooh, time is going quickly. Okay. So I guess the next section is Tristan regarding the draft of the STP. Are you still with us, Tristan?
I'm still here.
Good. Thank you for waiting on us.
No problem. Good discussion. All right, you want me to get into it?
Yeah, go ahead and share your screen with us.
Okay. Let's see here. All right, can you all see my screen?
Not yet. There it goes.
All right. All right, I can't see any of you, but feel free to jump in at any time. So today we're talking about the draft 2024 through 2033 STIP, or State Transportation Improvement Program. Just a little bit of background. My name is Tristan Winkler. I'm with the French Broad River Metropolitan Planning Organization, housed at Land of Sky. If you aren't familiar with the MPO, that's okay. We are a federally required transportation planning organization, and we cover the area in blue, which is essentially the region's urbanized area and areas anticipated to urbanize. So to walk you quickly through the acronym SOUP, that is transportation planning, there are a few pretty important steps and documents in how projects are developed. The first is the CTP, or the Comprehensive Transportation Plan. That's where transportation needs are identified. Then there's the MTP, or Metropolitan Transportation Plan. That's where you start producing your long-range priorities. We're required to look 25 years out. Then there's SPOT, or the prioritization process. That determines what projects are funded. And then we get to what we're talking about today, which is the TIP or STIP, the Transportation Improvement Program. That's a federally required document. It reflects projects' funding and schedules. And there are a lot of requirements about this document. And basically, there's a lot of regulations that essentially all projects of regional significance are required to be reflected in this document in order for our region to utilize federal funds. And so this document is really where the rubber hits the road. If you want to have your project implemented and it's a major project, you need to get your project into this document. Just really quickly, the way funding is broken up in this document is into 3 different tiers. And it's important to kind of just quickly recognize what these different tiers do. There's the statewide mobility tier. That for us is primarily interstate projects, and those projects compete across the entire state. So our projects are competing with Raleigh, Charlotte, Wilmington, Morehead City, etc. Then there's regional impact projects. Those are primarily US and NC routes, but also anything from the statewide tier. And those compete across all of the counties you see below that make up divisions 13 and 14 of NCDOT. And then there's division needs. That is secondary roads, bike ped, transit, everything else. And can also fund other projects from the other tiers. And projects compete across the DOT division. So the projects in Buncombe County are or have been competing with other projects in Rutherford, Burke, McDowell, Mitchell, Yancey, and Madison. So the way that the TIP and the STIP generally work is that you think of them as 10-year budgets. And the way that they're supposed to be kind of laid out is about 8 of those years worth of funding are considered committed to going to transportation projects. And there's usually kind of this a buffer of non-committed funding that usually goes into future rounds of prioritization. However, things have not gone to plan as of late. So something we've been talking about a lot are cost increases. And a couple of years ago, we saw the cost increases from projects kind of eat up the funding in that buffer. It was later determined that those cost increases ate up more than that buffer and ate up kind of the next round's worth of money. And last summer, DOT looked at cost estimates for all the projects around the state to look at how bad the problem was. And this is essentially what they got. So what this chart shows is if there were no changes to the transportation projects that are planned, there would be no new statewide mobility projects until 2041, no new regional impact projects for our region until 2053, and no new division needs projects until 2041 for division 13. Not an ideal funding situation. The cost increases have, I would say, really put DOT and transportation planning in a real bind. And so really the choice that's kind of been made is, you can either leave things as they are and tell people no new projects until, 20 or 30 years out, or you can make the decision to relook at a lot of the projects that are out there and try to right size your budget. And that's the decision that was made to essentially make cuts to right size things. But all in all, NCDOT is looking at a funding deficit of a little over $8 billion. That includes funding from the new federal infrastructure bill. And just to point out, one of the hardest hit regions is ours, Region G, that's us. Over the 10 years projected for this STIP, there's about $676 million available, and it is over-programmed by close to $1 billion. So I agree, Claudia. So a really not great programming and budgetary stance. So the NC Board of Transportation, along with the prioritization work group, decided we needed a process to decide what projects stay on and what projects fall off. And so a process was developed, and this is kind of the simple way I've laid it out to explain this process. So if you think about DOT and MPOs starting from scratch with the Transportation Improvement Program, The first thing that was done is delivery projects were added back. Delivery projects are projects that were scheduled to begin construction by 2026. Then, following that, reconsidered projects were added until budgets were expended. And kind of the projects that have been on the books the longest got the first cut in terms of what stayed on the list. Now, what we'll be dealing with over the next few months is trying to figure out whether or not there's exceptions to be made. It's called the flexibility option. And so if our region decides that we don't like a project that made the cut quite as much as a project that didn't, we can make those swaps within certain parameters. That includes cost parameters and also making sure that DOT, MPOs, and RPOs agree to those swaps. So the initial cut of this draft STIP that was provided to MPOs and RPOs on Monday, April 25th for our region, that is available on our website. There's going to be a webinar for local officials held later this month. All in all, for our region, what we're looking at is over $1.2 billion in decommitted projects across the entire MPO. To note, 1.8 billion in projects remain committed, but that is 17 projects that, as of right now, are proposed to be decommitted. That is before the flexing is done. Looking at it tier by tier, statewide mobility, considerable amount of losses, but regional impact really has by far the most losses for our region. And divisions 13 and 14 also have some considerable losses. Also, a lot of projects saw some schedule changes. So even for projects that were committed, a lot of them got bumped back. To note, one project was accelerated. So congratulations to Amboy and Meadow Road as the only project for construction to get accelerated by 1 year, I believe. Got to sprinkle some good news for my own sanity.
Yeah, that's one of our connectors too, which is important.
Right. So again, project swaps, that's what we'll be working with our local partners with over the next few months. And again, there are parameters on what we can and cannot swap. And moving forward, we'll be holding meetings with our local delegates and governments in May and June. We'll be going through public engagement over the summer, and then we'll be bringing any potential project swaps if they come up in August and September. And the final STIP will be adopted in the summer of 2023. And this is just the NCDOT deadlines that we've been given. And so to note, in terms of the impacts on greenways in the region, you know, just on the high level, most standalone bike ped projects in our region are funded through the MPO's allotment of federal funds. So they're not subject to this prioritization process. French Broad River West, Nasty Branch, Greenway connectors, the Woodfin Greenway, that was never on the table to be cut. However, Claudia, as you mentioned, a lot of key Greenway connections that were planned through DOT roadway projects, a lot of those have had their status changed. And so at this point, I think that is roughly all I've got.
Tristan, can you talk a little bit about the Swannanoa road project?
Sure. I made a really quick, terrible map, but a terrible map's better than no map. Let me pull this up. You all see that
Yes.
Yeah, so, sorry, this is, it'll get better. So this kind of shows a lot of the Greenway projects around the region, or around the city of Asheville, really. And so the projects in green and blue are the ones that are still committed in this draft form of the document. So the I-26 connector, sections B and sections A that include that Greenway, that's still in there. Riverside Drive, as well as the North Rad Greenway, that connection kind of between the Rad Tip and the Woodfin Greenway, that's still in. Amboy Meadow made the cut. However, the Sweeten Creek Road widening, that did not make the cut. And we had two separate projects with significant bike ped components on Swannanoa River Road. Those did not make the cut either. So in terms of Greenway planning for the city, it's definitely an impact, I would say.
Not just the city.
County.
State.
So,
Right.
Tristan, is Swannanoa River Road projects, is it swappable?
It is swappable.
What do you mean?
So we can look at other division needs projects that made the cut and see if folks would agree to putting Swannanoa River Road back in and taking another project out. So there are some possibilities, and yeah, we'll be talking to the locals about that, and hopefully getting information through our public engagement on other possibilities.
I mean,
Well,
Greenway Committee, I really feel like we have to do this.
Yeah, I do too, because we got to have that connection. I think that's a very major east-west connection for this community.
It's critical, and it's clear to me that the DOT is really not committed to doing it, and my assessment is they would prefer not to.
Well, it's going to be difficult, that's why.
We're not talking about swapping Amboy Meadow for Swannanoa. We're talking about swapping something that's not on this map, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Like
Tristan, would
separate
they need to
from from one of the other counties or in our district, right?
No, it would most likely have to be from another project in Buncombe County.
Okay.
So I made a whole handful of cursory maps.
Yeah, if you can.
But yeah, just to show what all is out there. Deaver View sidewalks, that's another project that made the cut. Riverside Drive improvements, Amboy Meadow, Sardis and Sandhill, the Craven Street Bridge, Blue Ridge Road interchange, and projects on Mills Gap Road.
Blue Ridge Road interchange.
Tristan, do you have a sense, like, do the swap projects out, they need to be comparable in cost?
Right. So obviously, you know, we're trying to get out of a budgetary situation, and so you know, we can't just pile on the money and get back into a budgetary situation. So what's outlined is that a project being swapped in cannot exceed 110% of the project cost of the one being swapped out.
And it would probably be, I mean, if a project was found and accepted that was more expensive than the Swannanoa, it'd probably receive higher consideration, right? Like if actually funding was saved. That's obviously perspective. I'm just envisioning that would be attractive.
Potentially. I mean, the thing to point out with Swannanoa, though, is that the costs on the books right now are based on leaving the road essentially where it is. And we know that is not really feasible.
No.
And so I think any discussions about swapping that project are going to require some more updated costs. And that's something that NCDOT is working on.
Hey, I got another quick question. Do we have access to the criteria that was used to determine what was brought back and what was determined to be continued to be delayed?
We do. So it's honestly, it's a very, very simple process that was used. It was what round of prioritization was a project funded. So projects that were funded in P3.0, P4.0, the older the cycle, the more of a priority it got. And so they worked through that list and then looked at if there was not enough funding, they would look at the score from that round of prioritization. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And then I'm also going back to the swap. Is there a way forward with funding matches? And like in a lot of ways, the new interchange sort of points to the future because although NCDOT is bankrupt,
They still put in that new interchange.
yeah, maybe morally bankrupt as well.
Yeah.
There was plenty of money for the interchange through an act of the state, correct?
Correct. You're referring to the Pratt and Whitney interchange.
Yes.
That was funded through essentially commerce funds from the state.
Yeah, but also with no plan for contingency for over costs. I remember that call, and they were like, "Yeah, if we get into an over budget scenario, we're just going to eat it," which seemed irresponsible. But that's my opinion.
No, it is irresponsible. I mean,
Look at the rest area that they just built. So what I'm wondering is there an opportunity for this? The Swananoa Greenway has got to be built. Period. It is the backbone of our active transportation infrastructure. And the state doesn't want to do it or won't do it. And so we've got to get it done. So we have to look at swapping, absolutely. But in addition to that, we have to look at what other opportunities are out there to leverage funds to get the Swananoa Greenway built. So, I mean, is there an appeal that we can make for the commerce funds from the state legislator to get something like, in addition to swapping, I guess what I'm saying, swapping out a smaller project and then finding additional revenue through the state or the feds to have the Swananoa Greenway built?
I think the first step would definitely be finding consensus on which project can be swapped out. I mean, that might be easy, but it also might be contentious. And somebody else has the same strong feeling that we do about this
Sure.
one.
What about fundraising? Is there some way that we could put private funds in something?
We'd need about $42 million.
Yeah, it's out of scope for what we're
A lot of base
considering.
sales.
Yeah,
And we have there are federal transportation dollars. I mean, when I was up in DC, I met with federal highways. There's lots of dollars out there that are coming from the feds. I mean, I can't believe that we even put together a raised grant package for that interchange and completely miss the opportunity. You're talking about a colossal failure of political leadership. That grant application is a beautiful example of it. Sorry. But could we do something like that to get that Swananoa Greenway built, in addition to swapping to find the funds?
So an important thing to note in terms of the federal discretionary grants is that NCDOT cannot go after grants for projects that they don't have on the STIP. And so that's part of what we're looking at here, is that we can't get a raised grant and then put the project on the STIP. It's got to be the other way around.
How did they get that interchange put on the STIP?
That was through legislative action. And I think just something to point out, a lot of the consternation there was that the interchange at first was set to impact the transportation funding for the region, but with the legislative action, that moved the funding. So it had no impact on other transportation projects. But as Jack pointed out, if project costs go over, then we need to start looking at Plan Bs.
Right. Plus, it's not a very good design. It's going from the fast lane for the exit, which is terrible.
I have, with the discussion of Swananoa, I thought, and am I wrong about this? I thought that I had understood that part of the problem with it is that with climate change, the river is changing so much that the transportation corridor may or may not even be feasible.
Right.
So I wonder if there's any alternatives for getting to the same goal for us, getting through town on that side without having to be right up next to that river, considering that it keeps changing and eroding, I suppose, some of the parts of what that corridor was going to be in.
Do you mean an alternative bike ped route or an alternative vehicular route?
Yes, a bike ped route, because we're talking about that being part of our backbone of our bike ped routes of the city.
And just to point out, Lucy's done a really amazing job of trying to push DOT to think outside of the box. And my personal opinion is I think DOT has been really receptive in looking into those options. And they're aware that there are a lot of resiliency challenges along that corridor. So again, kind of a parallel process is DOT looking at alternatives, whether that's raising the road, or moving the road, and which would include bike ped improvements either way. That's something that has to be figured out relatively quickly.
And that will require purchasing property too, which is another big cost.
And if the project remains outside of the STIP, how much work can DOT really do on the project to begin to figure it out?
As of right now, they do have a team doing preliminary engineering to look at it. So it's my understanding that engineering work is going to continue. Because you know, as bad of the news as this is, and it's quite the band-aid to pull off. The bright side of it is that it makes money available before 2053. So, you know, what we're telling a lot of our folks is, you know, get your swaps right. Figure out make sure your priorities are reflected. But remember, projects are going to be competing in the next round of prioritization in the next year or two.
Can we talk for a minute about the nuts and bolts of that process of identifying the swap and then what a body like ours can do like a discussion like this to encourage more?
Your audio is a little fuzzy.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't make that out, Richie.
Maybe this is better, I don't know. Can we talk about the nuts and bolts of the swap process, and so what this body should do, since we do have a desired alternative option, like is the action to send a letter to be reviewed by the NPO, or how would one proceed?
Really, I think the most important thing is going to be letting people know what your priorities are. I get the feeling it's Swananoa, and you know, yeah, as a resident, that makes total sense. But I really think that's the information that people are going to want to hear. Is these are the projects that we think are priorities that need to make this list. And, you know, we assume that some projects will hear more of that than others.
And what's the timeline for reviewing and proposing the swaps, and when would the NPO vote on that?
So we'll have either a survey or something similar to the some sort of public engagement over the summer. We haven't worked out the technical aspects of that. And then that'll go through our board and committees in August and September. And sorry, Mike, I just saw the chat. When I say our region, do I mean the MPO? Yes. Question of bond dollars, I think that's for you, Lucy.
So the MPO votes on the swap.
Right. So any swaps, again, have to be approved by the MPO as well as NCDOT.
To answer your question about,
By the local division, NCDOT?
Essentially, yes.
Okay, thanks.
there are no more funds in the Swannanoa transportation bond package. In fact, we're $2.5 million over budget and seeking funds to make up for that now.
But now, Tristan, didn't you say there was some funding?
Yeah, the MPO preliminarily approved $2.5 million in federal funds to be programmed towards this Swannanoa Greenway. So that's something that'll be going through to our board later this month.
So that'll cover the overrun that we have.
But most likely, but as Lucy noted, the funds, we haven't worked out scheduling, and so that may or may not work out with the city's time.
Good stuff, huh?
Phew. It's so overwhelming. That's the hard part. It's like I don't know where to start on this. And maybe that's where we need to do some brainstorming to figure out how do we get started on this.
Yeah, it's.
Do you have any suggestions, Kristen?
Again, I really think it's, you know, what are the projects that need to happen the soonest, and what are the projects that are okay to be pushed back. You know, everyone's going to have a different perspective, but making your perspective heard, that's a big part of the process.
Okay. Tristan, one quick question here. This is Jack. Sorry to step away for a second. I'm looking at the updated STIP document here, and you might have mentioned this, and I apologize if so. Looks like, you know, the Swannanoa River corridor widening itself is funded for engineering, right? Like for the preliminary engineering is what I'm reading on here, but not for construction.
Correct.
Okay.
So every project that is considered non-committed in the STIP has engineering work that's done on it.
Okay. Cool.
So getting the engineering done for Swannanoa would be a big first one of the steps, right?
Right.
And that engineering includes, includes some sort of decision point, right, in terms of where it's actually going to go, or not go, if that matter.
No official decision point. Really, the process at this point is trying to figure out what the most likely cost is going to be, and what the most likely alignment would be. But it would still have to, that project especially would still have to go through the NEPA merger process.
Cool.
Well, unless there's any other questions, I think, Tristan, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
No,
Hey, sorry, I got one more question. Sorry about the swap.
That's okay.
Could you could we do an accumulative swap, meaning like swap 3 projects for one? Because we're really talking about dollars here, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I will just say the MPOs on the committee that developed this push for as much flexibility as possible. And yeah, it's a budgetary exercise. So if you have 10 projects that are within 110% of a project being swapped out and it's eligible, yeah, that works.
And timeline-wise, that would be contingent upon getting the final estimate from these engineering studies, right? Like, we couldn't do that right now, other than rough estimates. Is that correct?
For the most part, with the estimates that are on the books are what will be utilized.
Okay.
I think Swannanoa is a bit of a special case because we know that the current estimate just is not it.
Right. Yeah. So that's what I'm wondering. Like, and I might just be naive in this. Like, can we start that process that Mike is wanting to do? And I agree with that process being the right fit to start with. But do we need to wait on updated numbers to begin that, or it's the best process if we're gonna go down that route?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I think the really again the best process at this point is figure out what the priorities are, that to me is step number one. And again, for every other project, for the most part, the funding that you see in the draft STIP is the funding that would be considered for the swaps. I mean, another project just to point out that also is in that case is the Patton and New Leicester intersection. I think that's in the STIP for like $2 million.
Wow.
Everybody knows that's not costing $2 million.
No.
But just to make sure I'm not missing this, like what is that number? Or where would I find that number that we would need to swap against for what's currently budgeted for the Swannanoa, given that it's not in the STIP?
That should be in there. I can double check, but it should be total project cost.
Okay, so it's in here, but it's identified as not a planned new project.
So, one comment and one question.
Oh, here we go. I see now. Sorry.
You're
just clarify for everybody. You're not working hard.
Sorry, you're breaking up, Richie.
Yeah, we can't get you, Richie.
I got it.
Okay, all right. One comment and one question, and the comment is really just clarifying, and that's to say, in case anybody doesn't know, the entire reason that we're talking about this greenway along this corridor is because it is entirely tied to the roadway project as currently planned to be built. So, you know, one, considering the timelines that we're talking about, decades, you know, it could be considered whether this connection, this lengthy connection, could be considered as some kind of standalone project. And that would be a hard road to go and very expensive, but the reason that it is married to the STIP process is because it can only be done currently if the roadway can be done. And then the other thing that I had a question about is whether there's any kind of restriping project or anything creative that would happen in the short run that would, you know, again, considering that we're looking at decades here, could give us a facility that's not great but good to make the connection, even if this project is interminably delayed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And so, just to point out, I mean, there are advantages to having the Greenway as part of the roadway improvement. The biggest one is money. With the new complete streets policy, I mean, this thing, a greenway along Swananoa River is in like 15 different plans. I don't think that's an exaggeration. And so with DOT's complete streets policy, that would be done without cost to the city. For it to be a standalone greenway project, most likely it would require finding another source of funds, and that would most likely require a 20% match from the city. So just to point that out, in terms of restriping or anything like that, as of right now, Swananoa River Road is not on the 5-year resurfacing plan from the NCDOT. So I'm not aware of an opportunity that would be coming up relatively soon.
Hey, Tristan, how come Meadow Road got bumped up?
That's a great question. Meadow Road is a bit of a programmatic miracle, but a big part of it is that a lot of engineering has been done. That project is pretty well developed. I think a few of you probably went to the public meeting that I think was in 2018 or 2019 for that project. So that project being further along and being able to be delivered helped it make the cut in that sense. That's my understanding.
All right. Well,
Okay. Wow. Lot to think about. Thank you, Kristen. We really appreciate your time coming to share with us.
Anytime, next time, Lucy, I'm going to ask to get the good news part of it.
I know, right? I'm sure he's been doing the dog and pony show for the STIP stuff, and I know it's getting you down, Tristan.
I mean, getting information out's important, but there are a lot of good things going on, and I do think having funding available in the future before 2053 is a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, we love you, Tristan.
Yes. Thank
Yeah,
you so
Kristen.
much. We're glad you're in that position.
Thanks, folks.
It's hard to be the messenger, but I do appreciate the information. And if anyone sees the link that I put in there for the celebrating the new rest area, you can drive out there in your car and park in one of the 100 parking spots, and you can see the dollars that could have been invested in the Swananoa Greenway right out there in the parking lot in the rest area.
Where's the rest area?
I-26,
Oh,
near the airport,
It's really beautiful.
is it?
Yeah.
I'm sure it rivals the Swananoa River.
Well, the
Wow.
Swananoa River looks so bad right now. There's so many trees that are falling in.
If anyone's interested, we're going to be having a series of litter cleanups on the Swananoa River this spring and summer,
Oh, good.
both from a pedestrian and from an in-boat perspective. And so if you're interested in that, keep an eye out or shoot me an email if you add to the list. But we'll be having a few with Curtis County Brewing, a couple with the Oakley Neighborhood Association, then a few open ad hoc public event type of things. So, no, not a whole lot in terms of like wood and strainer vegetation, but mostly on trash and litter. Chris Fred.
Oh, I'd like to see taking some of those fallen trees out of there.
Yeah, we don't list that a whole lot. Sometimes they have ecological value, but just start with the litter is the main thing.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Some tires, that's awesome. Good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, get the old John boat out there, fired up.
What would happen? I mean, I feel like the Swananoa Road is, it's our Pittsburgh Bridge. It's like one weather event away from total failure.
Yes.
And does that reset the opportunity clock if there's like a catastrophic event on the river?
There already has been a catastrophic event, but we're one away from another one.
Boy, that's a good
Yeah, I don't know if
question.
there's like a category for sense of urgency in terms of DOT funding, but
Well, if the road is if the road is washed out, they're gonna have to rebuild it. Be nice if we had a plan so that they rebuild it correctly.
Well,
Yes.
Claudia, do you want, it's after 5.
Oh, goodness.
I just want to decide to move on, but maybe we could just touch lightly on the etiquette campaign and then.
Well, I don't think we have anything else to add right now until we can get funding and stuff like that.
Well,
Do you think?
I suggested in the chat to skip it, but then also I realized that we do still have Mike School on the call, and he has a joint interest etiquette signage, and at one point mentioned having funding allocated for design. So if we could
Okay.
update from Mike and just leave it at that on like what we could potentially coordinate on, and then take the nuts and bolts of it for another meeting.
Okay. Mike, can you go ahead with that?
Yeah, I mean, AOB, we had a small budget for doing, because we recognized it kind of like independently that the issues, and it's not just, it is cyclists, but it's not just cyclists, it's all the users. And so if there was an opportunity to do some branding and to have like a communication plan, Asheville on Bikes would be interested in investing on that, in that, and helping lead it.
I would also, Lucy, I need to give you the grant application from the Blue Ridge Bike Club, and that might help with Asheville on Bikes budget. Maybe we can do something between the two of those.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
I'll send you that.
I mean, I was ballparking it all probably around like $15,000, including like a small sign package as well, to get it something really robust done.
And at one time we were talking about like signs on the greenways, but also a website,
Right.
or videos at least, that educational videos. Is that what you and Asheville on Bikes are thinking too, Mike?
Yeah, so what we're talking, that's sort of the communication side of the plan, and sort of like, yes, we need branding. And Jack, I know that you and I, we were out at Karen Craigmillia Park, and you and I were talking about this, and it's sort of like not something larger than just a kiosk at the parking head, but some communication that runs along the Greenway. But then also thinking and targeting what the issues are. Like, for example, are the issues dog leashes, right? And tripping up roller skaters. If that's like do we go to the pet stores, and is there a placard about Greenway etiquette? Do they have the social media assets so that the pet stores can be pushing out the same information that the cyclists are and the runners are, and the walking club? Because we need to be, from the AOB perspective, we need to really be talking about user types. And even in the last 6 months, I think all of our collective understanding of the users of the Greenway has expanded greatly. I mean, if you would have talked to me a year ago, I wouldn't have thinking quad skaters would necessarily be a user type on the Greenway, and quad skaters are. I mean, I bet if we went to the count, that would be a significant percentage. So,
What's a quad skater?
Like an old school roller skater as opposed to inline, like before.
Oh, okay.
And then and then on the other side of it, what AOB was really wanting to do is get the information of drilling down on what are the conflict issues. I mean, we know that, so that we have a problem. Like, let's say it's expendable dog leashes trips runner. Like, if we know that occurs over and over again, then we want to drill down to that discrete infraction. So if it's a retractable leash issue is the problem, we want to have another column that is like the solution. Like, what are we going to do to communicate that the retractable leash, so we really drill into the discrete things that are the conflicts, and then target really discrete communication strategies and branding to address those issues.